Morning, there's three things that I want us to gather from this text. And the first thing is this: it's very simply that my helpless life matters. My helpless life matters. You can insert yourself into that. Like, very much so, for us to be people of the Christian faith is for us to be those who advocate for the vulnerable. And now, let's kind of take a step back here and insert ourselves into first century Jerusalem, where this whole scene's playing out. You have to know and understand that people with a disability in Jesus' day were considered second, if not third-class citizens. Most children born with a disability in first century Israel didn't live past a day or two. Because what happened then, and what happens in many third world countries that we even see here in 2024, that if a child is born with a disability, if a child is born blind, if a child is born with some sort of limb difference, in my case, any sort of discernible disability, in first century Israel, what was happened is almost immediately after birth, the cultural assumption is that baby is disabled because of sin or because of the product of Satan, and nearly, probably 99% of the time, that child was put in a clay pot and left in the wilderness, put in a trash heap, or actively killed. Because the cultural assumption is that baby is broken, that baby is evil. And we look at a cultural assumption like that and we think, that's pretty messed up. But here's what I want you to know: things have not changed. In 2024, people like me are second-class citizens. People that have any sort of disability are being silently exterminated and nobody notices. For so many of you that sit in here this morning, maybe think back to your time in school. Think back to how many people you knew with a disability, and fast forward to today, how many people do you know with disabilities right now? Where do we all go? Y'all, the greatest single trigger for abortion in the United States is discernible disability. 66% of kids in utero that are found to have Downs in the United States are aborted. In Iceland, they boast that they've almost nearly solved the whole Down syndrome issue, and it's because they abort 99% of Down's births. Most of Western Europe, we're talking UK, France, Italy, Germany, 95% of kids with Downs are aborted. We're slowly being exterminated and nobody cares to say anything. Why? Because we can't live the American dream like you. We don't live an easy life. We don't live a palatable life. And y'all, I don't know how it has happened, but we have, as a culture, come to this place where if a child can't live the American dream, why even give that child life in the first place? And we have elevated comfort and ease as the greatest ideal of our generation, and we have totally eradicated the purpose that God has for that child's life. We cannot sit here and think that because I don't have two arms, my life is not worth it. We can't sit here as a culture and think because somebody can't intellectually process something at the same rate that you can, then they deserve to be dead. Y'all, that's a wicked way of thinking, and there are so many lives like mine that just need people to stand in the gap and to speak life over it. Because, you see it right here. You see it in John chapter 9. You see it right there in verse 2. The disciples look at this man and go, hey, Jesus, who screwed up that this guy was born this way? We can't be people that say that. We can't be people who believe that. We as people of life have to proclaim value over all lives. And y'all, we have to understand the Dobbs Supreme Court case a couple of years ago that turned back abortion rights over to the states. We think, oh man, that's a big victory for the sanctity of human life. And here in South Carolina, that's a great victory. But you also have to know and understand that the busiest abortion clinic in the Southeast United States is just a few hundred miles up the road in Charlotte. There's still hundreds of children being aborted in Charlotte every single day. Our work is not done as a church. In fact, our work has only got harder. And so my challenge to you this morning is what do you do about it? What are you doing to actively support and stand behind the lives of those like mine, the lives of those who are being threatened just because so many of these moms just don't know where to go or what to do? And I would challenge you, get plugged into the pregnancy centers that are here in Augusta. Get behind adoption ministries that are here both in South Carolina and scattered all over the South. If we're going to be people of life, it can't just be how we vote, it's how we give and how we support and how we serve. Do not let your voting record be the only reason why you are pro-life, because the second thing I want you to see this morning is that our lives right now matter. Our lives right now matter. If we are going to be people that say that a child in the womb is formed and fashioned by God to bear his image in all the world, that child as an image bearer has both value and worth and a right to live. Well, here's the reality. That same ethic is applied to every single person across the face of this earth. Every single person you're sitting beside right now in these rows, that is an image bearer formed and fashioned to display the glory of God in all the world. Whether it's a person that looks like you or talks like you, whether it's a person that does not believe like you, that person is made with worth, with value. And if we are going to be people of life, we have to affirm that value in every single person that we encounter on a daily basis. And hear me out, that also includes those who are very prayerfully seeking an abortion. That includes those of you in this room this morning that it's somewhere along the line in your past that you've had an abortion. Statistically speaking, there are a number of women in this room this morning that have had an abortion, and I want you to know you are not the enemy. God does not see you as broken. God does not see you beyond his grace. And it's for us to realize as a church that so many of these women that I talk to in pregnancy centers all across the U.S., each and every one of these women are in that position because they feel like they have no hope. They feel like they have no one that loves them, no one that supports them. And that has led them to the point where they think the only logical solution is to kill their child. That isn't an indictment on them. That's an indictment on us as the church, because they don't feel like they can come to us for help. Y'all, we have to be a people of life that when we see people that are in desperation, that they know they can come to us, they can be loved, they're not going to be judged, they're going to be supported, and they're going to be shown the love of Christ as Christ loved us, even as we were once enemies of his cross and of his cause. Y'all, if we are going to be people of life, we have to stand behind these moms. We can't be people who operate in some sort of cancel culture that this world operates in these days. We have to realize that even those who advocate for pro-choice, God formed and fashioned them in their mother's womb for them to carry worth and value. We can't demonize them. We can stand against them, but we don't have to be jerks. We have to be people who live out a holistic view of pro-life, because the last thing I want you guys to see this morning is that at the end of the day, the greatest thing that matters is a person's spiritual life. The greatest thing that matters is a person's spiritual life. If you read the rest of John chapter 9, the scene that plays out is this. This blind guy has been healed. This entire town is kind of put on its head because the guy that used to beg by the water source there in town is now no longer blind. He can fully see. He's walking around. Everybody's confused. And so the Pharisees pull him in to their midst. And then they're like, listen, you got to shut up about this Jesus guy because you're causing a big ruckus and we know he's a false prophet. This blind guy goes on to tell him, he says, listen, all I know is I used to not be able to see, and now I can, and nobody can do that apart from God. And so they throw him out. They're demonizing this poor blind guy. Jesus hears about it, and he goes and finds this blind guy. And come to find out, it's like this blind guy's like, hey, hey, Jesus, I don't know who this Christ is that these Pharisees were talking about. Will you tell me who he is? And Jesus is like, that's me. And you see this conversion moment that this blind guy has. He says, listen, Lord, I believe. I know you are the Son of God. God uses this moment of healing to totally transform an entire town because of what God did in a life that everybody thought was less than. Y'all, what I want you to know is this, is for those of us in this room that God has rescued and redeemed, God desires to use your life to show the world more of him. And it does not matter what background you come from. Doesn't matter how much life you have left. Doesn't matter how talented you are, what your platform is, how powerful you are. God desires for you to stake your life on him and then to go and tell the world. And some of us might not feel like we're cut out for that. I mean, y'all, that's me. How is God going to use an armless guy from the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, to show the world more of him? Like, y'all, if God really wanted to use me for his glory, he'd make me 6'8". He'd give me big buff arms. I could dunk on people to the glory of God in the NBA. That's glorious. Like, y'all, these days, like yesterday, it's all blustery and windy. Like, y'all, when it gets really windy outside with these floppy sleeves, I look like one of those floppy inflatable things outside of a used car dealership. You know, like that's not glorious, right? And so it's like there's been a long time in my life where it's just like I've wondered, God, of all the things that you had to make me as, why this? This is not glorious. God, I don't know how you can use this. Y'all, back in 2019, I'm sitting on my back porch drinking sweet tea, scrolling Twitter, and I'll never forget, I tapped on this one news article that was describing this abortion legislation that was going through the state of Virginia at the time, stated just north of where I am. And in this legislation, basically what they wanted to do was they wanted to open up abortion from conception to birth for any child with any discernible disability. And even the governor of Virginia described a scenario in which a kid like me, who was born with a disability, or a child that even survived an abortion, that in Governor Northam's words, he said that child could be born, that child could be kept comfortable, and then a conversation could ensue between the doctor and the mother as to whether the baby should live or die. What a lot of us would actively describe as infanticide. And I read this article, and it hits really close to home, because that's the conversation that was held over my life. And I think back to all the things that my parents were told that I would never be, and how many moms, how many dads in the state of Virginia in a moment of fear would snuff out a life like mine because it wasn't going to be easy, because I didn't look like them, because I couldn't cognitively function like the rest of the world. How many little lives were going to get wiped out? And so in that moment, like, y'all, I'm not a political dude. I want you to understand that. But it's like, I read through this article and I thought, I can't be quiet about this. Like, God has entrusted me with my story that God has given me. And it is the most selfish thing I can do to keep my story to myself in that moment. And so I thought, all right, God, I'm going to do what I can. And so it's just like, I shot a video on my phone and I posted it on Twitter. And in this quick little 40-second video, all I talked about is that the value of human life is stamped on us the moment of conception by our Creator God. And it doesn't matter disability or not, God forms and fashions each and every one of us with value, purpose, worth, and talent to show the world more of Him. And then I just posted the video on Twitter and then decided to go work in the yard for 2 hours. And so go and work and mow and get leaves up. And I come back to my phone a couple hours later, and it was a notification nuclear bomb that had gone off on my phone, because literally in posting that video in 2 hours on Twitter, it had been viewed 45,000 times. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I've got 9 followers, including my mom. You know, like, this is not what I was expecting. And so it's just like, I'm a natural introvert. Like, interestingly enough, I'm not super comfortable around people. So I panicked. I cut off my phone and I threw it in my office. I didn't know what to do. And so it's like, I came back to it later that night. It was a lot worse. And I had all these DMs on Twitter. It was like from different news organizations and people and all this stuff. And one of my DMs was from a lady at Fox News. And she was like, hey, we saw your video. We would love for you to turn this into a 1,000-word article. Send it to us tonight. We're going to run it tomorrow. Now, listen, I'm a desperate introvert. A lot of people apparently read Fox News, so I don't want to do this, but I can't chicken out, right? And so I was like, I'll just play dumb. And so I just typed back to that lady. I was like, listen, all I can talk about is armlessness and Jesus. Those are the two things I'm good at. So if you're cool with that, then I guess we're good to go. I'm like, there's no way. She types back, we're good to go. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And so I stay up till like 1 o'clock in the morning. I type up this article. I send it to Fox. They run it on their website the next day. And of all the bits of the internet that Apple News could use as their one push notification for that one Saturday, it was that one article. And in about 12 to 14 hours, 4.5 million people read this article about how a creator God stamps value on each and every one of our lives. So at the end of the night, I get a call from a New York City area code, and it's Fox News. They're like, hey, man, article went well. Could you be on an airplane in 2 hours? We really want to bring you up to New York, have you do an interview on one of our shows. Y'all, I didn't process it, didn't think about it. I just told them no and hung up, because I ain't. Nope. My introverted self took over, and so it's like, I'm a little shaken, and so I go in the kitchen. I need a glass of sweet tea and try to sort this out. And so I'm standing there at our fridge. I'm getting ice in my mug. And my wife, who's in the living room like 20 feet behind me, she heard my phone ring. And she's like, hey, baby, who was that? I was like, oh, it's Fox News. She's like, oh, what'd they say? And I was like, they want me to come on a show. And she's like, oh, that's so exciting. And I'm like, I told them no. It gets real quiet. And then my wife, very as she could only say, goes, wait, you had a chance to go on a national news program and tell the world about how much God loves them and how God formed and fashioned them in their mother's womb, and you chickened out because you don't like people? Yeah, that's pretty much so what it did. She's like, you're going to fix that? I guess I'm going to fix that. And so, y'all, no lie, 2 hours, I am on a flight to New York City, wake up the next day, and I'm on the phone with their producers. We're going through this whole interview, what we're going to talk about, what we're going to cover. We literally script out everything, questions and my answers before the show. Go on the show, do the interview. And the fourth question this woman asked me, we didn't talk about, we didn't green light, nothing. And out of nowhere, this woman, in light of us talking about abortion and sanctity of human life, she says to me, listen, something happened to you when you were 15 years old that changed your life, and I want you to tell the viewers at home what that was. And I realize this woman wants me to talk about the moment that I trusted and rested in Jesus as my Savior and my Lord and my King. And in the next 40 seconds, I got to share the gospel of God's grace with 7.5 million people. Y'all, I've been in ministry for 25 years. I have not preached to 7.5 million people. I'm going to have to preach for a whole lot longer to preach to 7.5 million people. But in that moment, by God's grace, with God using a armless redneck that had no business being on a nationally syndicated show, God used my life to show the world more of Him. I fully understand there's some of y'all in here, you feel like you're the last person in the world that God could use. You feel like you're too broken. You feel like you're not good with people. You feel like you're not talented. You feel like if people knew your backstory, they would have nothing to do with you. Y'all, you look across the pages of Scripture, and it is full of people just like that. God takes the broken. God takes the lame. God takes the blind. God gives a greater grace, and then God sends them out. The story of God has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with Him. And some of us this morning just need to trust that fact. You are not too broken. You are not too far gone for the grace of God. And some of us this morning just need to build our lives on that grace. And I don't know what that looks like. in your particular situation right now. But I do know God is calling you